Hey, welcome back to Daily Flash. I'm Mitch English along with Andrea Jackson. Let's talk about a dirty word we need to embrace a little bit more often. That word is no. Saying no actually may feel a little bit like a betrayal or even a little bit selfish, but when you're setting healthy boundaries, it is a must. So joining us now with more is Florence and Romano. Florence and welcome back to Daily Flash. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Love being here, and I love setting it up as a dirty word. Get that people get the attention right away when you say that.
Right? And it's actually
I know.
it's the first word we learn as humans, if you think about it, right? And
It's
it's a hard
true.
word to say because, there's so much emotion behind it, but it's a very powerful word. And you have 5 tips for us about setting
Right.
boundaries. And so let's go over some of those. The first one you say is just kind of just redefining your boundaries, and it's not about pushing people away. Explain that to me.
People get nervous when you say boundaries
Yes.
right away. They think it's a rejection. They think you're criticizing them, and they get on the defense right away. And boundaries really shouldn't be walls. They're actually bridges to a healthier relationship. I always say boundaries is you fighting for the relationship. If you didn't care, you wouldn't actually put in the effort to do this. So the goal is to create this village that thrives on mutual respect and support.
Okay. And again, and early on, I would imagine laying those boundaries down is just as important so that they don't cross them.
Well, of course, you're establishing these boundaries with communication
Okay.
so that you're able to be present for the people that really matter. And also, again, going back to that mutual respect and support, the way that you're doing that is by being very clear about what it is that you expect, but also knowing that this isn't just about you.
Hmm.
You have to be willing to listen to the other person about what their boundaries are as well and give them a chance to respond to what you are saying. It can't just be you
That
giving
makes
this
sense.
monologue.
That
It has to
makes
be
a
give
lot
and
of
take.
sense. All right. You say there's a cost of overcommitment that can really affect your boundaries. What are they?
That's why we have a hard time saying no. We want to be polite. We want people to like us. And we're people pleasers. I say we're all recovering people pleasers,
Yes.
honestly, at this point in our life. And overcommitment leads to this resentment and exhaustion and weakened relationships. So you have to ask yourself, are you showing up because you want to or you have to? And that's usually going to be the rabbit hole you go down when it comes to burnout.
I've heard sometimes that maybe a little something that could help with that sort of thing is just delegation, meaning, okay, commit and just delegating somebody else to be able to do that sort of thing. Is that something you should kind of take into a factor?
Of course, delegation is wonderful in a perfect world, but we all want to control everything and white knuckle everything. And it's so difficult to, give away that power to someone else because you're worried they're not going to do it the same way I will. But delegation is part of that village, of that community, knowing that you can give up a little bit of that to someone you trust. That's the caveat there, though. I'm not
Okay.
saying go and just ask anyone, make sure you're picking these people intentionally.
All right, you're saying that you have to have a good mindset, the get to versus the have to mindset.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Right. Well, the have to mindset is usually the obligation. The get to is the choice. But here's the thing: you're not going to be able to use those buckets to set you up for success if you're not doing the self care on the other side of it.
Okay.
So you have to have that perspective, of course, but that perspective is not going to work unless you're taking care of yourself and you're putting that oxygen mask on yourself first in order to take care of everyone else. So, of course, reframing that for yourself is going to help you be able to kind of discern what you're saying yes and no to. But remember, those buckets only work if you're taking care of yourself as well.
All right. And you mentioned this, alluded to it a little bit, but guilt plays a big part in making those decisions. What about setting boundaries without it?
Well, knowing that no is a complete sentence, that's a truthful statement, and also knowing that you have to exercise this. This is something you have to practice in your life, and the more you do, the easier it will become. And also, when you are saying no, when you are setting those boundaries, don't be afraid to set it up in a way that sounds nice, that sounds polite. You don't have to be rude.
Right.
Say what you mean and not say it mean. And boundaries in that conversation that can include a very, again, intentional and thoughtful way of setting up that conversation with goals in mind that are going to fight for the relationship, but also make sure that you're keeping those boundaries close and respecting the other person as well, knowing that they're going to hopefully have a response to the conversation you're having. And then where's the compromise? Because that's really what it all comes down to at the end of the day.
Compromise. Yeah. Yeah. Once you learn about compromising things, your life just gets a lot easier for sure. All right. There's a difference. There's subsets in this, what I'm about to talk about: workplace boundaries, friendship boundaries, and then the boundaries between workplace and friendship. Can you lay out a little bit of rules for that?
Yeah, well, workplace, it's no to extra responsibilities without, hurting your team or your career. And with friendships, it's a give and take, especially in friendships where you feel like perhaps you're being taken advantage of. You're more of a doormat. It's not reciprocal. So putting those parameters in place are really going to be helpful when it comes to, again, that discernment. That's really the trigger word here, where you're figuring out how you can balance these things. And family, oh my gosh, that's a whole different story half the time, learning boundaries with family members. But they often see that as a betrayal, I would say, if you're saying no or not showing up. But you have these buckets, and really the common denominator here is understanding what your bandwidth is, what the capacity is, and also the people that you're interacting with. I like to think about what's their personality like? How do they process? And if I'm going to
Sure.
have a conversation with them about boundaries, then I'm going to back into it that way based on how I know they respond to things and how they comprehend. And that's honestly going to be the most important piece of it as you come up with a game plan for that, because really at the end of the day, it's going to be about getting them to understand. So be thoughtful about the way you approach it.
Florence Ann, thank you so much. And if you would like to have more info, visit florenceann.com. There you can check out her book. It's called Build Your Village. Thanks so much for joining us. And we got more. Today's Trends